Permit me first to express my sincere gratitude to Patient Rights Watch Ghana for this initiative and for inviting me and convening what I consider one of the most important public conversations in our national life. There are conferences that discuss economics. There are conferences that discuss infrastructure, those that discuss governance. But there are very few conversations that ask a society one of its most difficult questions. What do we owe one another when life becomes fragile? That, I believe, is the real question beneath today's theme. Because although this symposium speaks of no bed syndrome, this conversation, as has been said by the eloquent speakers before me, is not ultimately about beds. If it were, we would carry our mattresses to the hospital. Beds are just furniture. This conversation is about people. It's about constitutional values. It's about institutional character. It is about whether public systems remain human under pressure or not. And it is about citizenship, what it means at the precise moments when a Ghanaian can no longer stand independently and must rely entirely on systems built in their name. Because there is perhaps no moment in a civic life more revealing than illness. And I know that. I'll tell you a story pretty shortly. Titles disappear. Influence becomes uncertain. Achievements becomes irrelevant. And all that remains is a human being asking a simple question: who will help me? That question is not merely medical. It is constitutional, and I will show you why. It is legal, it is moral, it is national. When someone arrives at an emergency ward unable to breathe, when a mother in labor is transferred from one facility to another, when relatives make desperate, frantic phone calls, when ambulances wait, when a family hears the words, "There's no bed." We are not merely confronting a healthcare challenge, we are confronting a constitutional moment. Because when life becomes dependent, institutions reveal what they truly believe about human worth. The problem we are facing is a true revelation of what we think of human worth as a country, what we put into preparing to save the humans that we call our citizens. They tell us whether efficiency matters more than dignity, whether systems are designed around convenience or around human vulnerability, whether public service means administration or responsibility. That is the question. And I'll tell you about my experience. One day I went to work at Cape Coast. That was my first day in the Cape Coast Court Complex. I went up the stairs, and coming down the stairs, there was a part of that building is very old. I'm sure you've heard about it. It was worn out, but because it was my first day there, I didn't know the building well. So I tripped, and I came tumbling down from the top to the bottom of a flight of stairs. It's a miracle I didn't crash my head or my spine, but I was left with a fractured right leg. So my right leg has titanium implants in it right now. But what stayed with me from that experience was from the Cape Coast Court Complex all through to Cape Coast Teaching Hospital, then 37 Military Hospital. The experience that stayed with me. So when Leonard Counsel Adodankwa asked me to come and have this conversation, I said, why me? Because I have seen firsthand the emergency response of this country. I have experienced it in Cape Coast, in Accra. And I've also experienced it outside this country, and I know the difference. So maybe I am someone who should speak about it. So from Cape Coast, well, like we've said this morning and afternoon, It's what they have that they work with. But it wasn't sufficient. At one point, because the incident happened in the morning, I had no sugar in my blood, right? I hadn't eaten breakfast. But all medications were administered without even dextrose, nothing. All medication, from morphine to whatever, were administered. So at a point, I started blacking out. And then I started sweating. So I realized I was getting hypoglycemic. And you're wondering how I know this. So the funny story is, I did science and I went all the way to pre-med before I changed to read law. So I was actually getting ready to go and become a doctor. I was in the biological sciences 2 years. So I knew what was happening to me, and I had done a lot of vacation internships in various hospitals. I had the experience, so I knew what was happening to me. Immediately, I called out to the nurse. Nobody. This is emergency. We are in accident unit, emergency at Cape Coast. No medical practitioner was around. So the judge who was standing by me, I just asked her, do you have any fruit? Anything sweet in your bag? And she said she had bananas in her car. I said, go and bring them. We gulped down the bananas, and then I realized it was stabilizing. When it stabilized, I found my voice. I created a whole chaos at the emergency. No, I want out of this place. I want you to refer me to another hospital. I said, oh, well, this is the best in the region. I said, then we go outside the region. We go back to Accra. I don't live here. I came to report for work for the first time, and I don't live here. So can you refer me to 37? Oh, 37. By the time you get there, you get bed. I said, really? So now, my family that didn't know what had happened to me, I had to place that call. I wanted to stabilize first before placing the call to them that something had happened at work. So because of this need for the referral, I had to place the call. When I placed the call, they said, okay, now we have to make calls. It's important to know this. I am a lawyer, I am a judge, but even me, my family is saying we have to place calls to prepare for your arrival at 37, because if you get there without preparation, my daughter, you will be in the emergency till the next day, and you will be seated on the floor. So at that point, I asked them to handle that, and then I worked on the referral. Now, there's no ambulance to take you to Accra. We don't have an ambulance to take you to Accra. It wasn't about money. We don't have an ambulance to take you to Accra. I said, okay, but you can get me the referral. I said, yes. All right, if I have to sit on top of a car, I'll sit on top of a private car. So we arranged the judicial service car. I sat in the back seat and propped the leg on the back seat with my back to the door, and that was the journey we made. But even before that journey, when they were about to package me and hand me over with the referral letter, I said, you see, when I came in, it's been almost about 5 hours or 6 hours. You gave me fair shot of pain. It will wear out by the time we get to Accra. I'll be in pain that my heart may not be able to take. So I beg you, check. If it is allowed, administer the next dose before we start the journey. The doctor was looking at me like that. I said, I am feeling it, or you are not feeling it. Will it kill me? He said, no, okay. I give you go ahead. So they administered the next dose, and that's how I was high throughout the journey. I didn't even know what was going on until we got to 37. 37, a different story. Yes, indeed. I sat in a wheelchair. We arrived at 6 p.m. I sat in a wheelchair till the surgeon my family had organized for me arrived around 11:30 p.m. At the emergency. Nowhere, no word, nothing. That was my experience. When he arrived, he processed me and everything, and, treatments began. But that was my experience. Another experience was when I had an appendectomy 10 days after a CS, and I wasn't recovering. It was in a private hospital. I wasn't recovering. The fever just kept going up. And they wanted to refer me to Korle Bu. My mother fell to the ground in front of the doctor and said, if you refer her, she will die. She has an idea about what will happen at Korle Bu. You will get there will be no bed. These are realities that I have lived. If we gave the average Ghanaian on the street the opportunity to come and tell us, we will understand that no bed syndrome is not a funny phrase to play with. And we need to diagnose where the problem is coming from and formulate solutions, workable solutions. The speakers, distinguished speakers before me, formulate very cogent solutions that are workable. We can work around them. Dr. Okoboy formulated some. Dr. Osei Kwame formulated some. I do not think that this symposium is unable to come up with a policy after the symposium and pass it on. For you have a wealth of resource persons here. Therefore, I believe that this is going to go somewhere. I want us to go straight into the law because, that is why I was brought here. The right to health and the constitutional meaning of human vulnerability. Ladies and gentlemen, as a judge, I have spent years thinking about rights, reading them, interpreting them, applying them, sometimes defending them in my judgments. And one lesson has remained with me. Rights reveal themselves most clearly at moments of dependence. So it is not when institutions are functioning smoothly, not when citizens are healthy, not when people possess influence, wealth, or alternatives. Rights become visible when people become vulnerable. Rights become visible when people cannot negotiate, when they cannot advocate, when they cannot wait, when they must rely entirely upon systems they did not design and cannot control. That is why healthcare belongs within the constitutional discourse, the legal discourse, because emergency healthcare is one of the places where constitutional promises become real. And when I say constitutional promises, I'm talking about the promises under Chapter 5 of the 92 Constitution, which have to do with human rights. And perhaps that is why conversations about healthcare are often uncomfortable, because they force us to answer the difficult questions. What does equality mean when treatment depends upon location? What does dignity mean when illness removes independence? What does citizenship mean when survival depends upon institutional response? And ultimately, what does constitutional government require when human life becomes fragile? Now, some may respond, and not without legal basis, that the 92 Constitution does not expressly recognize a freestanding right to health. For example, we have right to life, right to education, but we don't have a specific clause that says you have right to health. Strictly speaking, that observation is correct. There's no article carrying the title right to health. But constitutional interpretation, as the lawyers here will tell you, has never been an exercise in locating rights only where they appear in headings. Constitution speaks in text and context, but they also speak in values. They speak in structure, they speak in implication, and they speak in moral commitment. Our constitutional tradition has consistently resisted narrow and mechanical interpretation. That is what I was saying. We have recognized that constitutional rights are not isolated islands. They are connected commitments. They derive meaning from one another, and they must be interpreted in a manner that advances freedom, dignity, justice, and democratic governance. So in order for us to identify what the law says about our human rights when it comes to right to health, we would have to read a number of constitutional provisions conjunctively and interpret them interrelatedly. Therefore, I'll refer you to Article 33, Clause 5 of the Constitution. And it reminds us that the rights that are stated in Chapter 5, the whole of Chapter 5, all the human rights, do not exclude others considered inherent in democracy and intended to secure the freedom and dignity of man. Therefore, just because we do not see a specific provision that says right to health does not mean that we cannot interpret other provisions to birth the right to health, which becomes justiciable or enforceable. Please let me know if the lawyer Kezia is here. She'll be interpreting the legal terms for me. We just have to prompt her. That provision is remarkable because, so the provision in our Article 33.5, which allows us to expansively interpret the Constitution to encompass certain situations and certain rights that are not expressly provided for, is one that is profound. And the Constitution acknowledges that rights are not exhausted by enumeration. Some rights emerge because without them, constitutional guarantees become impossible to enjoy. For example, right to life. If you have a right to life and we don't infer the right to health, then it would mean that how would you enforce your right to life if your health is in jeopardy? So by necessary implication, the right to life, for example, has embedded in it the right to health. So if you take Article 13, which is what I just mentioned, it protects the right to life. But constitutional life cannot merely mean protection against deliberate killing, like nobody should kill you without justification. Life must also speak to preservation. So the right to life invariably speaks to preserving life. Life must mean that institutions are organized in ways that respect the urgency of human existence. For what value is life if systems responsible for preserving it become inaccessible at the moment of great need? Then we go to Article 15. It declares the dignity of all persons, which shall be invaluable. So we've done Article 13. We found right of health embedded in right in life. If you take Article 15, which is right to dignity, you are a dignified person. You should be treated with dignity. Even people who are undergoing interrogation or incarcerated, maybe serving a prison sentence, they are to be treated with dignity. So if you are sick, you have an emergency, you go to the hospital, this right, the right of your dignity being protected means that you are in a state of vulnerability. You should be given a certain treatment that sort of protects your dignity. So we can deduce the right to health from the right to dignity. Another right under Article 17, equality. So in a situation of the no-bed syndrome where, well, practically speaking, just 2 months ago, a friend of mine's father had an emergency, medical emergency, when they were rushed to UGMC. No bed, no bed. And they said, no, money is not a problem, we'll pay. No bed, no bed, no bed. No bed, no bed. But lo and behold, by some phone calls, the bed appeared. But Article 17 is telling us that we should all be equal before the law. Why are we not equal at the hospital during emergency? So the right to health, that gentleman, although he passed away later, his right to health is embedded, should have been embedded in he being equal to the person who placed that phone call. I don't want to mention the name, but that name moved mountains. That phone call moved mountains. But why must it be like that? So if it's just me and you, we don't know that man. I don't know him. And I don't know anybody who placed that call for me. If I were in that situation, if you were in that situation, who would place that call for you? Meanwhile, our Constitution says, well, we are all equal and to be treated. What is more a place to be treated equally than a place of health? Illness knows no stature. Illness knows no position in life. Everybody gets sick. Therefore, at the hospital, that is the precise place this Article 17 should have been enforceable. Everybody should have been treated equally. But lo and behold, my experience from my friend's father's death tells you, and I'm sure you also have certain stories, so I will not belabor that point. Then we have Article 34 and 37, Directive Principles of State, and all those things that the state is supposed to do for you. So when you read them, Article 34, 37 of the Constitution, you will see that the state is supposed to do certain things to help you realize all these human rights under Chapter 5 that I'm speaking about. But the question that most lawyers ask is, if the state doesn't, can you sue the state? We will come to that question during the panel discussion and the Q&A.